Night falls quietly over northern Israel. From the hills overlooking the Lebanese border, small lights flicker in villages scattered across the valleys. Farmers close gates. Cars move slowly along narrow roads. But in command centers several kilometers away, screens glow with live satellite feeds. Officers monitor radar signatures. Drone patrols sweep across dark terrain. Military briefings begin earlier than scheduled. Across the border in southern Lebanon, similar vigilance unfolds. Observers track aircraft movements. Communications channels remain active through the night. Fighters move cautiously between fortified positions carved into hillsides. Meanwhile, televisions across the region replay the same developing headlines. Tensions involving Iran are rising. For Israel and Hezbollah, the question becomes immediate, because their frontier has always existed on a razor's edge. Short distances, heavy weapons, and decades of unfinished conflict. The central question now emerges. If a broader war involving Iran unfolds, could the Northern Front ignite a second battlefield? And how far could the consequences spread across the Middle East? The Israel-Lebanon frontier is shaped by history as much as geography. The modern confrontation emerged during the Lebanese Civil War and Israel's military presence in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah formed as a militia resisting occupation, but evolved into something far more complex, a hybrid force, political and military. The defining moment came in 2006. A cross-border raid triggered a 34-day war. Thousands of rockets struck northern Israel. Airstrikes hit across Lebanon. The war ended without a decisive outcome, but it changed everything. In a controlled scenario, tensions rise, but remain contained. Israel increases readiness. Air defenses expand. Reserve units mobilize. Hezbollah signals caution. Rhetoric intensifies. But large-scale attacks do not follow. Diplomatic pressure grows. Restraint becomes the priority. The border remains tense, but not explosive. Now consider a more dangerous path. Small incidents begin to multiply. An exchange of fire, a drone interception. Each event carries greater meaning. Missile launches increase. Retaliation follows. The cycle accelerates, and the battlefield expands beyond control. At this stage, who decides when it stops? If the Northern Front becomes a major war zone, regional consequences follow. Military postures shift, defense investments rise. Lebanon faces severe disruption. Infrastructure damage spreads. Alliances evolve. Regional strategies are reassessed. Beyond strategy lies human consequence. Towns near the border empty. Families relocate. Schools close. Across the border, uncertainty mirrors itself. Economies strain. Markets react. Daily life shifts. Borders may appear as simple lines on a map, but they carry layers of history, security, and human experience. The Israel-Lebanon frontier reflects this reality. If conflict spreads here, the consequences will not remain local. Because in a region where distances are short and rivalries long, escalation can travel far beyond the battlefield. And sometimes the most important question is not who begins the conflict, but who chooses to stop it. The first signals do not come from the battlefield. They appear on trading screens in Shanghai. Energy futures begin to move, subtle at first, then faster. Analysts lean closer, watching price curves shift in real time. In Moscow, briefings begin behind closed doors. Officials gather around long tables, reviewing intelligence summaries and economic projections. Voices remain controlled, the implications are not. Meanwhile, in ports across East Asia, tankers continue loading crude oil. Shipping routes are monitored more closely. Insurance risks update quietly in the background. Across global news networks, maps of the Middle East fill the screen. But the focus is no longer only regional, because when conflict involving Iran escalates, the question reaches the world's major powers. The central question emerges: if war intensifies, how might Russia and China respond? And how could their decisions reshape the global balance of power? Russia and China approach the Middle East differently. Russia's role reflects a long strategic tradition, from Cold War alliances to modern military projection. China's path has been more economic, focused on trade, energy, and long-term stability. Iran sits at the center of both strategies, a partner for influence, a supplier of energy. This is not an alliance, but it is alignment. In a controlled scenario, conflict remains limited. Russia calls for restraint. Diplomatic channels remain active. At the same time, opportunities are quietly assessed. Energy markets begin to rise. Revenue increases follow. China focuses on stability, ensuring energy continues to flow. Trade routes remain open. In this scenario, both powers stabilize the system. Now consider escalation. Conflict expands. Energy markets surge. Shipping risks increase. Russia's position becomes more strategic. Influence expands through coordination, but risk rises alongside opportunity. China faces a different pressure. Energy security becomes urgent. Supply uncertainty grows. And a critical question emerges: do great powers stabilize or intensify the conflict? Beyond escalation lies transformation. Energy systems begin to shift, supply routes diversify, dependencies change. China accelerates long-term infrastructure strategies. Russia strengthens its role as an energy supplier. Financial systems adapt, trade patterns evolve. These changes do not happen overnight, but they reshape the future. Economic effects spread quickly. Energy prices rise, transportation costs increase, supply chains tighten. For consumers, the impact is immediate: higher fuel costs, more expensive goods. For developing economies, the pressure is greater. Global systems adapt, but adaptation takes time. Power in the modern world does not operate alone. It moves through networks, energy, trade, diplomacy. A conflict in one region can trigger decisions across continents. Russia and China do not simply observe, they interpret, they respond. And through those responses, they shape the outcome. Because in modern conflict, power is not only about force, it is about influence and the ability to shape what happens next. The movement begins quietly, not with explosions, not with headlines, but with numbers. On trading floors in New York, London, and Singapore, screens flicker as energy prices begin to shift. At first, the changes are small, then they accelerate. Analysts lean forward, phones ring more often. Across global shipping networks, route planners adjust trajectories. Some vessels slow, others wait. Insurance costs update in real time. Airspace authorities issue revised guidance. Flight paths curve away from areas now considered uncertain. Meanwhile, in homes far from the Middle East, the first signs appear differently. Fuel prices tick upward. Transport costs begin to rise. Groceries edge higher. The connection is not immediately obvious, but it is already in motion. Because when conflict involving Iran disrupts a system as interconnected as the global economy, the effects rarely stay confined to one region. They move through energy markets, through trade routes, through expectations. The central question emerges. If a war involving Iran reshapes global energy flows and financial confidence, could it trigger a broader economic slowdown? And how deeply could that impact reach into everyday life? Today's episode examines how modern economies transmit shock, how markets respond under pressure, and what history suggests about the consequences of geopolitical disruption. The global economy has faced energy shocks before, and each time the consequences have extended far beyond oil markets. In 1973, the oil embargo triggered by the Arab-Israeli war caused global oil prices to rise sharply, quadrupling within months. The result was not just higher fuel costs, but widespread inflation across advanced economies. A few years later, the 1979 Iranian Revolution again disrupted supply, contributing to another surge in oil prices and prolonged economic instability. These events revealed a critical pattern. Energy is not just another commodity. It is a foundational input across nearly every sector: transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and logistics. When energy prices rise, costs spread. And when costs spread, inflation follows. Today's global economy is even more interconnected. Roughly 20% of the world's traded oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, making it one of the most critical choke points in global trade. That concentration introduces vulnerability. If disruption occurs, even temporarily, markets respond not only to supply changes, but to expectations of risk. There is, however, an important distinction. Modern economies also have more tools: strategic petroleum reserves, diversified supply chains, and advanced financial systems. These provide some buffer against sudden shocks. Some analysts argue these buffers could prevent a severe global downturn. Others caution that high debt levels and already elevated inflation could amplify any new disruption. Both perspectives highlight the same underlying reality. The global economy is resilient, but it is not immune. Beyond immediate disruption lies a deeper transformation. Economic shocks often accelerate long-term structural change. A sustained crisis involving Iran could reshape global energy systems. Countries may accelerate investment in alternative energy sources, renewables, nuclear power, and domestic production. Supply chains could be redesigned. Companies may reduce dependence on single region sourcing, even at higher cost, to improve resilience. Financial systems may also evolve. Periods of instability often prompt reconsideration of global monetary arrangements, trade currencies, and payment systems. This does not happen overnight, but trends can accelerate. The 1970s energy crises, for example, led to lasting changes in energy efficiency, strategic reserves, and international coordination mechanisms. A future shock could produce similar adjustments. But structural change carries trade-offs. Greater resilience often comes at higher cost. More diversification can reduce efficiency, and transitions take time. In the short term, economies must operate within existing systems, even if those systems are under strain. Several realities are clear. The global economy remains highly sensitive to energy price fluctuations. History shows that geopolitical shocks can transmit quickly through inflation, trade, and financial systems. Modern economies have more tools to respond: strategic reserves, coordinated policy, and diversified supply chains. But uncertainty remains significant. We do not know how long a conflict involving Iran might last. We cannot predict how markets would react to sustained disruption. And we cannot fully anticipate how governments would balance competing priorities under pressure. What we do know is this: economic outcomes are shaped not only by events, but by decisions. And those decisions are made in real time, often under uncertainty. The signals are subtle at first, not visible in the sky, not announced in headlines. They appear in procurement reports, in policy discussions behind closed doors, in quiet shifts in defense strategy. In Riyadh, advisors gather to review long-term security assessments. Documents circulate across polished tables. The tone is measured. The implications are not. In Ankara, strategic planners evaluate regional developments with increasing urgency. Maps stretch across screens, showing shifting alliances and emerging risks. Across global intelligence networks, analysts begin to ask a familiar question, one that has shaped international security for decades. What happens when deterrence begins to change? Because nuclear decisions are rarely made suddenly. They emerge slowly, through perception, through fear, through calculation. Meanwhile, across the Middle East, populations follow unfolding events with growing awareness, not just of conflict, but of what might follow. The central question emerges: if a war involving Iran alters the regional balance of power, could other states begin pursuing nuclear capability? And could that process reshape the security architecture of the Middle East for generations? Today's episode examines the logic of deterrence, the risks of proliferation, and the long-term consequences of a nuclear shift in one of the world's most complex regions. Nuclear weapons have long occupied a unique place in international security. Since the mid-20th century, their primary function has not been battlefield use, but deterrence. The idea is simple in theory. If the cost of conflicts becomes too high, conflict becomes less likely. This logic shaped the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union developed vast nuclear arsenals. Yet direct confrontation between them never occurred. Mutual vulnerability created restraint. But proliferation introduces complexity. When more actors possess nuclear capability, deterrence becomes harder to manage. The Middle East has historically remained outside large-scale nuclear proliferation. Israel is widely believed to possess nuclear capability, though it maintains a policy of ambiguity. Other regional states have not openly developed nuclear weapons. However, Iran's nuclear program has altered the strategic conversation. Tehran maintains that its program is for peaceful purposes, while many international actors view its capabilities as a potential pathway to weaponization. This difference in interpretation shapes policy responses. Some analysts argue that even the perception of a potential nuclear capability can shift regional calculations. Others argue that strong international monitoring and diplomatic agreements can prevent proliferation. Both perspectives reflect ongoing debate. What remains clear is this: nuclear decisions are rarely isolated. They influence and are influenced by the actions of others. Beyond immediate escalation lies a deeper transformation. A nuclearized Middle East would represent a fundamental shift in global security architecture. Deterrence would no longer operate through a limited number of actors. Instead, multiple states with varying capabilities and strategic doctrines would interact within a shared space. This increases complexity, and complexity introduces risk. Communication becomes more critical. Misinterpretation becomes more dangerous. Crisis management becomes more difficult. Military doctrines would adapt. Missile defense systems would expand. Early warning systems would become central to national security planning. Diplomatic frameworks would also evolve. New agreements might emerge, focused on transparency, confidence-building measures, and risk reduction. History shows that nuclear systems can stabilize over time. The Cold War eventually produced structured arms control agreements and communication mechanisms designed to reduce accidental escalation. But that stability developed over decades. A new nuclear environment in the Middle East would begin without those established frameworks, which introduces a period of heightened uncertainty. Structural shifts also extend beyond security. Global non-proliferation efforts could face new challenges. If one region moves toward expanded nuclear capability, it may influence perceptions elsewhere. In that sense, regional decisions can carry global implications. Several realities are clear. Nuclear capability fundamentally alters strategic calculations. Perception plays a critical role in deterrence dynamics. And regional security environments influence national decision-making. But uncertainty remains significant. We do not know how regional actors would respond to sustained shifts in deterrence. We cannot predict whether diplomatic frameworks would adapt quickly enough to manage new risks. And we cannot fully anticipate how global powers would respond to regional proliferation. What remains consistent is this: nuclear decisions are rarely inevitable. They are shaped by leadership choices, international pressure, and strategic calculation. History shows that restraint is possible, but so is escalation. Power in the modern world is often measured in visible ways: military strength, economic scale, technological capability. But nuclear power operates differently. Its influence is not defined by use, but by presence, by perception, by the possibility it introduces into every calculation. A nuclear shift in the Middle East would not begin with a single moment. It would unfold gradually, through decisions made quietly, through strategies adjusted over time, through responses to actions taken elsewhere. And once those dynamics begin, they rarely remain confined to one region. Because nuclear decisions reshape not only security, but expectations. They alter how states interpret risk, how they define stability, how they prepare for the future. Which means that the question is not only whether such a shift could occur, but how the world would adapt if it did. Deterrence can prevent conflict, but it also changes the system in which conflict exists. And sometimes the most profound changes are the ones that unfold without a single shot being fired. The signals do not arrive with sound. No explosions, no visible impact. They move silently, through cables, through servers, through code. In dark rooms, analysts watch screens filled with shifting data. Lines of code scroll faster than the eye can follow. Across digital maps, invisible connections pulse between regions. Data centers hum with constant activity, every signal monitored, every anomaly tracked. This is the battlefield, not physical, but digital. And when conflict escalates, it does not stay visible. It moves beneath the surface. Cyber conflict did not emerge overnight. It evolved, from early systems to global networks. Today, infrastructure depends on digital systems, power grids, oil facilities, financial markets. All connected, all vulnerable. Governments monitor threats constantly, tracking activity, analyzing patterns. Because in modern conflict, disruption does not require force, it requires access. In a controlled scenario, systems hold. Cyber defenses activate. Threats are detected, blocked, contained. Teams monitor networks continuously. Firewalls intercept malicious activity. Data centers remain stable. Systems continue operating. Energy flows. Markets function. Infrastructure remains secure. International coordination strengthens defense. Under this scenario, disruption is avoided. Stability holds. But escalation changes the equation. Networks begin to fail. Systems slow, then break. Power grids show warning signals. Lights flicker, then disappear. Airports lose coordination. Flights are delayed. Systems glitch. Banking networks freeze. Transactions fail. Access is lost. Oil facilities malfunction. Production slows. Supply is disrupted. The attack spreads, not through geography, but through connection. What happens when systems fail simultaneously? When disruption is no longer isolated? Because in a connected world, failure travels, and it travels fast. Beyond disruption lies transformation. Systems adapt, defenses evolve. Artificial intelligence monitors threats in real time. Countries build stronger digital barriers. Infrastructure becomes more secure. Global cooperation increases. Agreements form. Protocols expand. But complexity grows, and complexity introduces new risks. When systems fail, people feel it. Work stops, access disappears. Businesses close temporarily. Airports slow, travel halts. Hospitals face pressure. Families lose connection. Uncertainty spreads faster than information. Some realities are clear. Digital systems are essential, and they are vulnerable. But uncertainty remains. We do not know how far disruption could spread, or how quickly systems could recover. What matters most is response and decision. The modern world runs on connection. Invisible, constant, essential. When that connection is disrupted, the effects ripple outward, across systems, across economies, across lives. Because conflict is no longer confined to the visible. It moves through networks, through systems, through the foundations of modern life. And in that world, the most powerful disruptions are often the ones we cannot see. What are your thoughts on today's analysis? We'd value your perspective. Share your insights respectfully in the comments below. Thoughtful discussion makes these conversations stronger. If you found this documentary informative and balanced, consider liking the video and subscribing for more in-depth global analysis. Until next time, thank you for watching.